Hello.
Hi, I'm Pat, and today I'm trying to solve a problem that the Meteor build has, and it is single target damage. Now, we're never gonna do super duper well against single targets, but I think this makes the entire ordeal a lot easier, except specifically against the Butcher and Son of Malphus, because their stats are very weird. They're shockingly hard to stagger. But anyway, if you are new here, this is what the Meteor build is. Starfall Coronet turns Meteor from a mana skill into one that has 2 charges and is a cooldown and adds even more meteors that you're dropping. With liberal use of Lucky Hit and other friends such as Ice Blades, we can keep cooling down Meteor and keep throwing down meteors, which, as you can imagine, is super duper effective against large groups of enemies. By the way, that appears to be an old picture. My charge cooldown is actually at 3.67 seconds, which you'd think is a tiny thing, but thanks to Ice Blades and its enchant is actually not that tiny a thing. Well, no, and we're not running the Ice Blades enchant here. Big surprise, I know. But the problem with this, as I see it, against large targets, against boss targets, is that, we cover a huge area with a lot of damage, and that's great in the average encounter, Hell Tides, and so forth. Actually, it is a bit overkill for Hell Tides, and by a bit overkill, I mean super duper overkill. But a boss is a singular target. While they are big, they don't necessarily have that big a hitbox, and you're not likely to land all your meteors on them, so the effective damage you're dealing is not that great. Single target damage for us, not fantastic, even with X-Falls, which this build is running. Additionally, bosses cannot be CC'd in the truest sense. They can be staggered. They have to be staggered. That's that little that little meter right under their name. And when they are staggered, they do count as having all the crowd control effects applied to them. So suddenly a bunch of our bonuses apply, which by the way is the problem, since you're not actually CCing them. For the most part, until they are staggered, a lot of our damage bonuses doesn't apply. Like our Devouring Blaze does not work at full efficacy. However, and this is the good part, Blizzard, I feel, is the solution to that problem. Not only does it synergize with X-Fall because of its massive Lucky Hit chance, and not only does it synergize with the Meteor enchantment because it can occasionally drop meteors, it provides us with a tremendous amount of stagger. That is in fact what a lot of people used to do on, well, they probably still do that on Uber Lilith, just like spam staggers under, then switch gears and literally switch gear to deal an enormous amount of damage to her while she is in her staggered phase. The good news is I don't like gear switching, and you don't really need to do that against Nightmare 100 bosses. Maybe if this season's event does require us to fight higher level or more resistant stuff, like a lot of Butcher type enemies, maybe we'll think about it. But for now, this is very much, look at that stagger, look at that nuttiness, because we're not just applying staggers through Immobilize from our meteors anymore. We're not doing it through one of our passive fire skills anymore. We're not doing it just through our lightning spear. We're doing it through Blizzard, and it is incredibly good at it. And as a slight bonus, and by slight bonus I mean extra benefit and I mean extra goal, it controls mobs very well, making it kind of safe to start running around with our Raiment. Not that it wasn't safe, because things tended to die and we're running Raiment to begin with so that we teleport in and stun things anyway, grouping them up for a beautiful meteor. We have yet another layer of defense. One is our barrier from our passive and just casting a passive spell. By the way, if you summon a meteor for your enchant, it does count as casting a cooldown ability, so you do get a barrier off that, just so you know. Also, those barriers don't stack, so don't worry about spamming your abilities. Just rotate them appropriately unless you are panicking, which I do a lot. We have Fortify from our Seneschal, and of course we have a massive pool of life. So that is the singular benefit of this. I did not find a lot of success against bosses with the Fireball variant. A Fireball plus Meteor plus Frozen Orb variant that might have the same effect. I have not tested it, but I imagine Frozen Orb does also a lot of stagger because it spits out a lot of stuff. However, the problem is you're going to have to give up an enchantment slot for it, and I'd rather have the Firebolt enchantment to apply burning as early as possible. Yes, Meteor does apply burning, but it takes a while for it to land, and that's, that might be all a baddie needs to run up to you and ruin your day. Yes, you can freeze them, but I prefer absolute or more safety than less safety. I know that's not what the gameplay you're seeing implies, but yeah, that's where I'm at. Additionally, setting things on fire way earlier thanks to the power of Lightning Spear gives X-Files more chances to proc, and yes, I am convinced that it is using fire bolts lucky hit on that. I tested it, and it's like, that's proccing way more than anything with Lightning Spear's 10% lucky hit chance should. The X-Files, I mean. But honestly, I could have been just really, really lucky that time, and I wasted my luck on testing Firebolt and X-File instead of betting on the lottery or something. You could replace Meteor with Frozen Orb, but at that point, where is your whimsy? Where is your fun? I mean, yes, it's in some ways probably a better option since it is more consistent, but also giant fireballs from the sky. Oh, and of course, a cold-based X-File proc, which will help deal with mobs faster, allowing us to go through dungeons with greater speed and kind of increasing our single target damage since X-File also hits the main target, the one exploding. So yeah, there it is. I feel like I have explained it enough, but if I haven't, leave your questions in the comments below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Coincidentally, full build in the link in the description below. So if you decide to just leave the video and check that out, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, do all those nice things and more because they will help me out a lot. For the rest of you, let's get into discussing the gear aspects, paragons and skills, and of course, our little buddy the Seneschal. And this is a good time as any to remind people that this is not an early game build. This is a late game build. You might want to try using Meteor early on. I didn't. I just used Arc Lash all the way to all the live long day and sometimes a little bit of Chain Lightning, but mostly Arc Lash because I just found it simple. The Blizzard Meteor build is something you build towards. So anyway, without further ado, let's start discussing the gears. The gear. It's not gears. I guess it's gears. No, it's gear. Actually, the setup here is very similar to the cooldown Meteor variant. We're of course running Starfall Coronet as well as Raiment of the Infinite for just the massive amounts of damage, and Starfall making the build all in all possible. Now, while Starfall does give you a bit of extra damage thanks to enemies damage to stunned enemies, as well as extra ranks in Glass Cannon, as well as the ability to pull things into a Meteor. Like, it has a lot of offensive utility. If you primarily use your teleport as a safety tool, as you probably should, as you sensibly should, you can always go with Soul Brand. But I feel like this really smooths out the gameplay. Like, sometimes monsters are going to be in a wide area and you want to pull them in. Pull them in. Show them who's boss. And have the Meteor potentially drop even more Meteors, because Meteor does have that thing where if it hits 3 or more enemies, there's a chance of dropping an extra Meteor. Or 2. For the gloves, we're running with the Shattered Stars aspect, and for the pants, we're running Juggernauts. The pants are full defense, except, of course, for ranks in Meteor. Now, the damage reduction against burning is actually 1, rolled very poorly. 2, works very well, but a max roll damage reduction. It's like getting, like, a more coverage damage reduction. And compared to the, like, high caps, the top ends of damage reduction against close and distant, I think it caps out at, like, 24. This caps out at like 28 point something if you have them both at max roll. So I prefer damage reduction and damage reduction against burning. But damage reduction against close and distant is also fine. The armor is important. You need a good roll on it. Well, just not a minimum roll on your Juggernaut's pants so that you can reach the cap of... Look, some people say 13,200, some people say 13,500. It hits 13,500. Anyway, Shattered Stars to further improve the value of our Meteor by adding Meteorites that deal 30% of Meteor's damage on impact, which is a lot. Also, it burns things like Meteor. I like the lucky hit chance on our... Oh my god, I have not rolled the strength away. That should be like attack speed or something. Or the lucky hit. Wow, that's actually not a great pair of gloves that I have, but they do the job. The important stats are there. Lucky hit and critical hit chance. Okie dokie. Boots, Esu's Heirloom, extra critical strike chance, movement speed, critical strike damage, and mana cost reduction. All just a fantastic pair of boots, and what allows us to get a healthy amount of critical strike chance despite having 2 unique rings. Chain of Three Curses, or the Three Curses aspect, or the aspect of Three Curses, I think increases the damage of our Meteor and Fireball. Well, our Meteor at any rate increases its critical strike by a multiplicative value of up to 60%. This bonus is doubled against healthy targets, which means if it gets first strike, it hits really hard. That's an extra 120 multiplicative damage. That's like going back into Season 1, which is to say pretty damn good. If I had my choice, I would replace the damage reduction from distant enemies to cooldown reduction to get even more off our Meteor as well as our other utility skills. A lucky hit chance with a barrier is also nice, but I would also recommend like a amulet that has bonus to all defense, because I think you can have plus ranks to 2 sets and then a third one to a specific passive. So like plus mastery, plus defensive skills, devouring blaze passive, and cooldown reduction. But I like the defensive rolls that I have as well. For our weapons, I'm running Stormswell Aspect for the extra damage against vulnerable enemies while we have a barrier, and because I am running the Breaking Tuning Stone on our Seneschal, they're almost always vulnerable. Also because of our Lightning Spear, also because of our Ice Blades. Basically, we're making things vulnerable all the time, pretty consistently, and we always have a barrier. At least if you rotate your skills, you're, doing very well. I use the Conceited Aspect on my offhand as well as a lot of lucky hit chance, but there's an argument to be made for the new Ice Blades aspect, the one that increases its chance to apply vulnerable, extends its duration, and increases your vulnerable damage by 25%. It's a similar damage buff, and one that is not reliant on you having a barrier, although you should have a barrier. If you don't have a barrier, you're probably in trouble anyway. I am saying that it is an option if you don't have a good roll of Conceited. To no one's shock, Talrasha's Iridescent Loop makes an appearance because it is just fantastic. It is everything we want in a ring. It's damage, it's lucky hit, it's resource generation, at least for our, for our Blizzard, and it has cooldown. What more do you want? It also gets you up to 45% extra damage, straight up. Also X-Files. X-Files very good. Do X-Files. Extra single target damage that can be procced by both our Blizzard and our fire effects and our burning effects. Well, the fire effects are the burning effects. That's what I meant. Anyway, point is big damage. Big damage. I think the singular thing that can replace this is like the Uber ring, the Starless Sea or something. The one that just increases your damage straight up by 40% when you spend your resource and makes your resources cheaper. So that's kind of nutty, but that's an Uber. But where I'm from, I use Grab, not Uber, and X-Files is the only thing that the game has allowed me to grab. Or is it Shifal? Anyway. Okay, that's it for Gears and Aspects, and now we're going to talk about the Seneschal, which, I'm not going to lie to you, is the exact same thing I did in the last video. So I'm just going to let last video's Pat explain all of this. Look, we ain't thinking out of the box on this one because we really don't need to. Tempest, Breaking Support, and Safeguard. Oh, and Arcing Support, and Flash of Adrenaline for the other one. Hooray! Yeah, that's it. That's it. But for those of you who don't know what that is, Breaking Support allows us to destroy enemy barrier effects, which is nice, but it's more important that it makes things vulnerable 100% for 2 seconds. Well, 100% chance to make things vulnerable for 2 seconds. Arcing to make sure that it applies that effect as much as possible, and since it shoots at a wonderful 0.8 seconds, we have Safeguard support to keep our defenses up through the 15% damage reduction provided. And a Flash of Adrenaline just is a straight up 20% damage bonus, and with Tactical and Duration support, it has a duration of 12 seconds and a cooldown of 12 seconds, which means there's a gap of 1.5 seconds to casting time for it to go off. So yeah, you basically almost always have 20% damage up, and that's pretty cool. I added Fortify support because there's literally nothing else that can be there except maybe the the attack speed support to make it cast faster, but that seems like a waste. I'd rather have the Fortify, honestly. If you get the Tuning Stone that improves its efficacy by 150%, Flash of Adrenaline is where it's gonna go. Remove the Fortify one. Honestly, that is rapidly becoming the war cry of, well, every class. The war cry of every season. It was like, here's the free shouts. Let me explain the exact same thing over and over again. But I digress. Old Pat, take it away for skills and Paragons. Okie dokie, skill tree. We're going to be using Firebolt, 2 points, so that we can put it on as our enchant, because we want things on fire long before we see them, and Lightning Spear does that very well. Aha, I learned the name of the skill. And because setting them on fire early on, off screen, means we don't have to wait for our meteors to set things on fire and activate our damage and defense against burning, which is great. Additionally, I am firmly convinced that it is using Firebolt's lucky hit chance because it procs X-File more than Lightning Spear should, because Lightning Spear has a lucky hit chance of 10%, and that's after like all our buffs. So I'm convinced it can do that. So you can start softening up the next room if you're lucky, which is great because while we are tough, we are still running 5 ranks of Glass Cannon thanks to Raiment of the Infinite, and that makes us a little bit softer than we're used to. Potent Warding, of course, for your ranks. If you're following, or if you got like super duper best rolls ever, you can actually use diamonds on your jewelry, even just 2 pieces of jewelry, and max out your resistances, and we can get a lot of value off this. of like the extra maximum resistance. I mean, 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but it is, especially if we start looking at levels beyond 100, monster level 154, depending on what the vault ends up being. Not the vault, the whatever this year's event is. I mean, this season's event is. 1 point to devastation just to get into 3 ranks of elemental dominance. Now, we're not actually gonna get an enormous amount of value off that, but we'd end up with like 3 points that are just sitting around doing nothing, and I don't like that feeling. This doesn't really do all too much for us. All this does is marginally improve the damage we don't care about from Blizzard, and maybe improve our X-File damage by up to 12%. But even then, I'd rather have the little bit of extra damage on our Meteor, because that's a lot of extra damage. Because the base damage of Meteor is enormous. But anyway, up to you. You can put that somewhere else if you want. You can put that in like... Where else can you put that? You can put that in Teleport to get the cooldown down, or a bit slightly a bit longer lasting Flame Shield. Either way, it's 3 points you can play with. Also, Flame Shield. Of course, we're going to be picking that up for defense. I grew out of it. I no longer use Enhanced Flame Shield. Are you proud of me? I'm an adult now. But I really like that little bit of like extra crit chance, but it doesn't matter in the long run. I think at law of averages, we're just throwing so many meteors out there, but it matters, of course, for more consistency, but I, wanted the points here more for things that are almost always active. Teleport, of course, into Shimmering Teleport. 3 ranks into Glass Cannon, raise to 5. Elemental Attunement. Go on your 3 ranks in Precision Magic. Summon Ice Blades, of course, for the extra little bit of cooldown. I tested it with and without Ice Blades. It was marginally noticeable, but it was still noticeable. You can see the procs on our Meteor, and thus I kept it on the bar. I was very tempted to remove this and put it into Ice Armor just for the extra defensive tool, and you could do that. Just move it over here. Bing, bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. Maybe even a regen, and I don't know, 1 point to teleport. But I like the cooldown. I like the greater consistency afforded by it, because we can get to throw our meteors like 1 second earlier, and that's actually a big deal, especially if you're in a pitched fight. Lightning Spear into Invoke Lightning Spear helps activate our Control Legendary Glyph. Is that what it's called? Or just a Paragon Glyph? Either way, 3 ranks into Mana Shield, because now we have a Spender. 3 ranks into Protection, because, well, Barrier. This doesn't stack, by the way. It does not stack with itself, which is super duper weird to me. If you cast 2 cooldown spells, it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't stack and give you like 6,000. So it just goes on top of itself, which is fine. 1 rack into Blizzard just to get to Mage's Blizzard. This is mandatory. We don't really need it. Blizzard is here for X-File procs, as well as a lot of CC, and most importantly, added stagger against bosses. The greater the stagger on bosses, and like big bosses, big names, the ones that don't get CC'd, the better off we'll be, because a lot of our effects and damage don't really proc that well, like Devouring Blaze. Like, they can't be immobilized, so we can't actually get the maximum value of our damage. That's a lot, actually. So Blizzard's damage being increased, but not duration. Blizzard offering us a slightly faster stagger on them gives us a much easier time dealing with bosses. Now, that doesn't mean we're like premier boss hunters, but it does help a lot, and is what primarily inspired me to make this sort of build, because that's the problem I was looking for a solution to, and I think this might be it. Because Fireball wasn't doing it. It was just like solving the same problem that Meteor does, which is up next, by the way, with Wizard's Meteor 3 immobilized, so we can get maximum value off Devouring Blaze. But this is our bread and butter. We hurt everything with Meteor. Max it out, baby. Why do you have 1 point? There you go. Much better. Okay, so I guess that's where the points can go, and now this just sits around being really awkward, so that still stays there. That is awkward. I don't like it there. I don't like that there. We're gonna move that. I'm not gonna grow up. I'm just gonna keep it there. It's still like 3%. And it's not gonna matter with the math on this, probably. Anyway, we ranks into Inner Flames for the extra damage while we are healthy, and we're gonna be healthy a lot, because we're always gonna have a barrier, and we'll just jam on that Q if we need to heal. And by Q, I mean potion. Devouring Blaze for the extra crit damage, which we are reliant on for both our X-Files procs as well as our Meteors. And I believe this does affect X-File because it is a general increase in your damage rather than something that that refers to a skill, because X-File isn't a skill. Crippling Flames are the extra little bit of staggerability on bosses, as well as the occasional chance to just straight up immobilize people, which is great. Now for our passives, I decided to skip out on the Warmth and went straight into Hoarfrost, which improves our damage against chilled and frozen enemies, which is going to happen a lot thanks to Blizzard. And it does apply to all our damage, not just ice. And, Frigid Breeze just for a little bit of extra mana. I mean, you could remove this and move this back over here. There's a lot of options for the build, which is really nice. But I like the consistency, man, and we want to keep throwing at Blizzards as much as we can. To keep up both our mana shield, that's 3 Blizzards to put up our mana shield for 5 seconds, or to just keep stacking the freeze as much as possible and keep the X-File train going. That's not supposed to be there. We're supposed to be in Estus Ferocity. There it is. What happened here? What was I doing? Am I having a damn stroke? Anyway. Estus Ferocity for the extra critical strike damage as well as the critical strike chance improvement. I apologize. I mean, yes, it all still makes sense. This is still partly how I'd lay it out, and you have 1 point to play with that might end up in Enhanced Flame Shield anyway, because this is mandatory. You can't remove this because you need to keep clusters unlocked. But yeah, there you go. Sorry for the confusion. The final thing on the board itself, on the build link itself, is going to be perfectly fine. What the hell was that doing there? I wasn't even... Well, whatever. Paragons. Okay, Maluki, here is Paragon board. We're going to pick up Elementalist and slot it right down at the very start and get the bare minimum. And I do mean bare minimum, just to get things going. It needs only 40 intelligence. We don't really need to overstack the intelligence because it gives us no value. We go up and up into Searing Heat, pick up Pyromancy, pick up Searing Heat for the extra critical strike damage, as well as increased direct damage equal to 10% of your damage with fire bonus, etc. Pick up Reinforced, drop it here to improve the value of our Flame Touched, which improves our fire damage as well as our fire resistance, which is really cool. Go straight on up to Frigid Fate for the extra vulnerable damage and cold resistance, and then drop the Adept right there. I tested it. I can't see the increase in Blizzard size, although I'm pretty sure it does exist. I can see the increase in both damage and size for Meteors. It's like a little bit bigger, but big enough since, you're dropping like 3 Meteors on people, so that works out. Then we go on to the left first, ignoring this because we don't really need that or want that or have the space for that, to go to Enchantment Master, where we will put in Tactician to improve the defensive. Well, no, not the defensive skill. Well, okay, yes, the defensive stuff like the element. No, that's not it. The increase to all elements. And we're going to pick up the extra resistance to elements because as we, at least at max rolls, you can afford to just put on diamonds, and even 2 or 3 diamonds depending on your stats. And you don't need, and you might even be able to add a skull there somewhere. But, we naturally hit the armor cap thanks to Juggernaut anyway, so you won't need that. Just saying. That's what I went with, Tactician, to improve the value of this and this. So that's hooray, big damage, all damage, including our cold damage, which is great because that also improves our Blizzard X-File. While a secondary thing, I'd still like to do big numbers. Go on straight up to Static Search, where we will drop the Destruction Node to give us a lot of extra critical strike damage. I did pick this up. This is technically optional because this is a Dex mod, and this is just extra damage to stun enemies, but we stun people a lot with Raiment, so we may as well try to delete things as much as possible. Then we go back to Frigid Fate and head on straight right to the Burning Instinct node, where we'll pick up the damage against reduction. We don't quite reach the requirement for that as is, but you might be able to with your specific rolls, where we will drop the Glyph of Control, which improves our damage against crowd-controlled enemies. Now, with Blizzard as well as our Lightning Spear, we are efficiently stunning and freezing enemies. But more importantly, we are also consistently chilling enemies, which means that at the very least, we will have 10% increased damage, which is pretty neat, I think. Go on straight up here and into the saddest one, the Icefall, which, you know what? Not that one. Not that one, but there's a note I'm going to look at later to explain that. I think this is the right... Yeah, I don't really care about the... I guess there's damage reductions against chilled enemies, and that's great and all, but we just really want to activate our Flame Feeder. That all said, Actually, you can party. No, you can't do that. There's a note here that Frigid Fate, because it improves our damage based on our vulnerable damage. If you somehow cram that into your build, I would recommend changing out of Conceited and putting on the Ice Blades aspect, just for a little bit of extra damage, I think. The Ice Blades aspect that improves its vulnerable application and gives you up to 25% extra damage against vulnerable. Oh, there it is. Womp womp. I think, barring a few changes, this is the build I'm gonna run. If I want to run Meteor into like whatever race thing, this might be the one I would use. It's fast, it's efficient, and depending on the final boss, we might not even need Blizzard Stagger, but I still might go with the Blizzard just for the extra control and X-File proc. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, do all those nice things and more. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Anyway, happy Valentine's Day. I am Patinator. I will see you later.